everybody, to the Shelburne Planning Commission meeting of May 24th. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Suppose we do a motion to approve first.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, moved by Andrew, second by Dick. Any discussion?
Other than it's potentially ambitious to get through all three of those sections.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and keep things on time for where we're headed. Okay, well, if no modifications, all in favor of the meeting minutes as written? Aye? Or, I'm sorry, the agenda. All in favor for the agenda as written?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Oh.
With authority and speakers. Okay, the next item is approval of the minutes from May 10th.
I had no notes.
I was not here, so I don't think I seconded the minutes motion.
I did not even notice that. Well done.
I like getting credit for that.
Yeah. Hopefully we're contributing nicely to their discussion.
I think that was probably Susanna.
Susanna?
Yeah.
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 You guys look so much alike. That's exactly what it was.
I just remember her seconding something early.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that was her.
Yeah, I second that.
All right. Yeah, I didn't have anything. The minutes look good to me. So, if no discussion,
I need a motion.
yeah, I guess you're right. I realized
I read the minutes. I did not watch the video.
That's fair. Well, I don't think we're going to wait for you to watch the whole thing to comment on it. So, all right, a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, moved by Kate, seconded by Andrew. All in favor of approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next item is any disclosures relating to any potential conflicts of interest for any of the topics tonight?
No.
Seeing none. Next is open to the public. Are there any comments unrelated to any agenda items that we'll be getting to? All right. Just here for the transportation discussion? Awesome. Okay. So then we can move on and get into the comprehensive plan. Let's keep it, well, we'll just go through it as written. We'll spend an hour on transportation and then just a brief touch base on energy and then the remaining time on future land use. So if we want to jump in, I imagine, yeah. And then we can just look at whatever comments we've put in. Are there any, now last week, Kate, Andrew, Dean, and I met just to get a base organization down. And then from that, I saw that you had added some more structure to it. Do you have any intro comments or anything, or any areas to focus on?
I just, sort of carried through the, what we had done, but since it was just me doing it, I put it in suggesting mode, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that there's anonymous stuff? That's what was that like your, some things you did
That might have
back in the
been,
day?
remember, yes, it might have been, yeah.
Okay.
Somehow I learned that there was,
Right.
my kids were using my
Google
computer.
access, yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
so.
So as far as this goes, maybe first and foremost, because I know there are people here interested in the conversation, part of it is, I don't know if you have specific comments that you want to address or have us to keep in mind as we're going through it, or just have an opportunity to raise a hand if there's a particular point as we're going through it. I think we're easy.
Are you going through line by line, you thought?
Mostly just sort of comment by comment. I feel like we could just go through a lot of the edit stuff. We can, as long as there aren't any objections, we could accept it. So then it's just formally we can clean up as we go. For things like periods, spaces, commas, that sort of thing, I just accepted the any changes that I did. But I did add some comments just for discussion. So maybe we could just hit them as we go through, and then if there's anything in particular, just raise a hand. And
so in reference to the 17 comments that we sent on it that you received today?
Yep.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. Or actually, I saw that that was what you sent, right, Dean?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I forwarded by email a document that came.
And I did see that. That was not today, though. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no, it came like around 11 o'clock this morning.
Am I losing my mind already?
See it?
Yeah, I don't think I did either then. I saw something a couple days ago.
I think this is this one?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Timer is
There
at
it is.
10:48.
Yeah. Okay, I read the previous one. I did not see this one. Okay, so maybe if we have, I'll try and keep this.
And just look on with me,
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
or you can see them here. I guess, too.
Yeah, we can do that too if you want. I'll try and keep this open on the side as well. If we miss something, just feel free to raise a hand. Make sure that we can get those in there. All right, so first one was page 1, paragraph 1. There was a add a by
Into the fourth
car.
line, to the fifth line there.
maybe I'll put my second.
Right, so basically foot, cycling, and car is
I'm looking
the,
to you, Kate, to
That's the suggestion, is to add also by car?
right.
Well, I think that's absolutely not a problem now. I mean, the problem is to give cycling and pedestrians some ability to do that. Right now, that's how we get around.
yeah, so just so that everybody can get around safely and by those 3 modes. I think
Yeah.
That's good. So on foot, comma, bicycling, comma, and by car?
And who
Or
wants
I
to be
guess,
the-
or, all right, I could do that, I guess. All right. Bicycling. Okay. And
I mean,
then-
I would just echo Kate's point that I think that was already assumed. That's why it wasn't noted explicitly, that that's the norm. What we were trying to emphasize was the fact that through a lot of the town, it's not convenient to get anywhere by bike or walking. So just trying to have an additional emphasis on that component.
We were also coming from the point of view of just inclusion, so if someone has a disability.
Yeah. But I just,
Ellen and
yeah,
Shane.
I just didn't want you to think we were like not,
No, I
you know, like
understand.
overlooking
Yes,
cars. but-
Yeah, but we just wanted to support you in being inclusive and addressing everyone that might not be able to relate to the biking and even the walking.
Well, it would be nice to have by transit or something, frankly, in there, because, you know, especially as the population ages, there are going to be people who are maybe not able to get around, you know? So, I mean, maybe we'll have AVs and those, and smart cars, but, you know,
Well, and the other way to approach that is just say something along the lines of majority of residents can safely and conveniently reach local destinations, you know, by any, you know, by all modes of transportation, so that we don't,
switch it to that.
once we start naming things, then like, well, what about this, what about that?
Well, what do you guys feel about that? Just changing it to by all modes or something?
Yeah, I think that's more.
Okay.
Is that agreeable?
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. The next one was the third paragraph starting with historically.
I think your addition of which makes sense there.
Okay. Prioritize, resolve, add that. So there was a question about talking in terms of historically?
Right.
Is that?
Yes, this is Steve Bayetti on Bay Road. We thought that it was kind of like, we just didn't really know about the purpose of the paragraph, because it was kind of like reflecting on the historical in the past, and we thought that the document was more intended to be an aspirational document. That's how I've heard it described. So we didn't really know, why it helps.
It is. It is an aspirational document. I think that having this in here kind of sets the tone to indicate that the way the town has grown from a transportation standpoint has predominantly been focused around the automobile. And there's a lot of theme in here where we're looking more from a connectivity perspective. So paths for pedestrians, bikes, share the road, that kind of thing. So it's more just to say this is how things have been done, and we'd like to shift the mindset toward more of an all-inclusive, multimodal kind of thing. Obviously, cars aren't going away, and we need to handle that volume, but spread it around.
So would it work if then, just at the very end of the paragraph, we've just added where the autos, due to unsafe auto speeds?
At the end of the last sentence?
Yes, of
Made
the
travel by these
paragraph.
modes difficult due to.
Unsafe auto speeds?
I would say that's one of the factors. It's one of the most important, but there's also, incredibly narrow right-of-ways. There's other lack of visibility. There's a lot of things, but the speed is definitely a huge problem. Maybe we could say unsafe speeds and other factors or something like that.
Good. It's okay with me. Yes.
Without, so we're not getting into the,
Yeah, I mean,
We're just
whole
keeping it
laundry
open.
list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that work? Oh, wait, no,
Often
I
due to
didn't.
unsafe.
Yeah. Sorry, I was listening and not reading the sentence. By these
Yeah, I mean, I
means.
actually kind of like it without that, just because I think that's what the sentence is trying to say, is that because there's a lack of infrastructure and facilities for these modes, they're using ones that are designed for cars, so they're unsafe. Again, I think just by calling out speed or any specific issue, then we've got to enumerate them all. So I actually like the sentence as written.
I think reading through this, I would tend to agree with that, just because seeing how we do end up with rabbit holes, and by keeping it generic, it highlights the point of safety without somebody saying, well, you didn't have this listed in there, so the intent wasn't there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I think, again, just rereading all your historically, I mean, those two paragraphs are intentionally, I think, set off against each other. So historically is that paragraph, this is kind of what has happened, led us to the situation that we're in, which is unsafe going forward. So there's this sort of logical progression through time. So although you're right, the document should be forward-facing, kind of had to reference how we got to where we are now, and then how we want to change it going forward. So
Because this is a significant policy shift for the town. Up until now, it's been, kind of more along the lines of, it would be really nice if we could have more bicycle and pedestrian facilities, but a little bit lukewarm on, you really got to do this. And now we're saying, no, things have shifted to such a point that we really, we need to take this seriously and find ways to make it happen.
And is that okay? Because particularly the next paragraph, I think, solidifies that by saying effectively the goal is to have safe travel options for all. So we're not. Yeah, I think I'm good with how that is written, unless there's an extreme objection.
Moving to the next paragraph where it starts with
Going forward,
Yeah.
if that were changed to if changes are made?
I would propose that that is inherent in that statement, that going forward, this is what our transportation system will do. It's not doing it today. So this is effectively a shift toward looking at multimodal and safety of all travelers.
Or something along the lines of, with a different focus, or, I mean, like, the change of priorities. I mean, I see what you're trying to say, that
Yeah.
if changes are made, I mean, that's sort of what we're getting at, but I don't know how you'd phrase that. Okay?
Shut the microphone. Steve Bayfield, Bay Road.
We want to make sure that you're on the next.
I'm loud enough to reach that mic. I think looking at it, the way that it's worded right now is maybe if feasible, something along those lines should be part of that, because the way that it's stated in that paragraph is regardless of what it's going to cost, regardless of what it's going to hamper, going forward, we have to make it do this way, as opposing to if it's feasible, if the pros outweigh the cons. And that's not worded that way right now. It's just worded that we shall. You know, we will provide safe travel options regardless.
Right, and why should somebody who is a pedestrian or a cyclist be shortchanged? Because the priority ends up being on the automobile. So I think we need to find ways to make it safe for all people. And there are ways to do that if there are concerns about changes to the right-of-way that, you know, people might not agree with. There are many options that the presentation on Bay Road from several months ago was exceptionally poor and unimaginative and just wrong in how they presented the options. So, I mean, I am not prepared to cede, you know, that much livability to cars. So we are, if you continue through the document, we are acknowledging that it's sometimes the right-of-ways are very difficult to work with as existing, and there's a balance between preserving character of the area, which is really important as part of livability. We're recognizing that, but what has happened is with the where feasible is that people have kind of said, well, okay, well, it's just not feasible, and that's the end of it. And we want to create a kind of pressure where, no, we have to find a way to do this. Maybe that means putting in an off-road path or some kind of a new version of the Tie Hall path or something along those lines. So, you know, we're talking, it's a kind of separate but equal system, and I mean that in the best possible sense, that we're trying to create, and to just not let this off the hook, you know, that it's just, gee, it's hard to do this, so we're just not going to, because that's what has happened in the past.
Yeah, not so much off the hook, but Church Street used to have cars. You know, there is an extreme to where I don't think we're willing to go to.
Yeah.
That there has to be some type of a middle ground.
Sure. And one thing, thinking this through, and I think the reason I had the reaction I had is because I'm thinking about how this document is structured and where it's going. Like this particular path, this is just saying going forward, this is what we're looking to do. But then this is followed by a set of goals, objectives, recommended actions. There isn't going to be, the way that this process works, it's not as though, if we were to change a bylaw, we would need to reference the plan on where it says in the plan that it backs up changing that bylaw. So this paragraph on its own wouldn't just be one of those reasons. Like, it would need to, you'd be referring to recommended actions and other things, and you really could carry this argument to a lot of tedium in terms of, well, if I'm just looking strictly at these words, that allows me to do this, but that's part of the point of having the discussion, and nobody's just gonna, I mean, there isn't an open budget for this, so I think that there are a variety of factors that come into play. But I would say that if as we go through objectives and recommended actions, if there are things that are not consistent or hitting these concerns that you're talking about, then that would be a good spot to reword there.
So, if you're ready to move on,
Yeah.
I'll shut up. I didn't know if this
No,
was,
go ahead.
Well, I recall some of the conversations early on involved the use of the word shall versus should.
and I think that's probably given rise to some of the reaction. If the commission is committed to using shall, then a change wouldn't resolve some of the concerns. But as I was sitting here, I was wondering whether or not a rewrite so that it said, and this is subtle, maybe it doesn't do enough, if it said going forward, improvements will be made so Shelburne's Transportation System 1 provides, it avoids the word shall. I don't think it reduces the idea that we need to make these commitments, but it's a little less absolute. So again, it would read, going forward, improvements will be made so Shelburne's Transportation System 1, and then to modify it a little bit, provides safe travel, B, ensures that. Does that help?
Because we don't really know how we're going to do all this yet. I mean, we're just setting up the policy for, this is what we're going for.
I was just sensing that the word shall for somebody like Steve is maybe like, well, how do you know if there are constraints? And so I was wondering if there was a way to say almost the exact same thing but without the word shall.
Sure. That's fair. I understand the concern. I also think that we would be here until July if we're going to do this on every sentence. So I'm trying to strike a balance.
So you would look something, well, I mean, is that what you're trying to say? So that.
Yeah. Yes, et cetera. Right. You got it. That was just the idea.
That would be
I mean, I don't know if the commission does need to sort of establish a stance. Some of these things, it may be, it's a good idea and you make note of it, you won't change it. It'll come up again during public hearings or public meetings in the summer. But if you're comfortable as a group the way it is right now, you take note of the comment, and like I said, it may be something you change later or maybe not.
I just want to do it so that we could see it. I mean, these guys could see it and say whether that.
I didn't want to go be the third guy in there.
Yeah. Does that cover that though, by that change?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then really though, as we're looking at the recommended actions and that sort of thing, that's where I'd be more tight on making sure that we have that, because those are the things that are going to get referenced in the document that gets put together with any bylaw change.
And based on other historic feedback from, primarily you guys on Bay Road and other people though, that we've always tried to be sensitive to the idea of while fitting the local context and so, phrases like that, so that, and we understand that, I mean, Kate's point is right, we're not going to put a double sidewalk on both sides down Bay Road. That just doesn't make sense. But, there could be a way to have, some ways to share the road that are safer for bikers while not widening that thoroughfare at all. There's things you can do with stripes and lanes and things. And we actually cover some of those specifically in this document later as ways that we think, could have a road that kind of does it all. And again, I mean, I'm sensitive because I've been riding my bike to Shelburne Community School. Actually stopped at your store today and got some candy on our way home. And, it's just, there's still some places that I'm like, with my 6-year-old on a bike, it just still scares me. And these are on some of the better biking routes, so.
So in that same paragraph on B is the next comment to change while to if. And I do see the concern, I see it both ways.
Right.
Because to me, while fitting the local context, if local context, like it's an impossibility to have something beyond just a road or just a path for that matter, then the opposite wouldn't be available. If we say if, then if we're hanging on words, that would be something saying, somebody could say, well, it says if, and we don't believe that it does, and therefore, and you just never get past those. But again, I think that this would apply in the recommended actions to really make sure those words are tight. I could go either way if anybody feels really strongly, but otherwise I would.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way it reads.
I think that the way it's written now would be closer in line with a statute and the complete streets law than if you said if.
Yeah, I agree. And D to add where practical. Yeah, and I also understand the where practical is the concern, and I think specifically with Bay Road, as I understood some of the concerns originally, is that there was a study done and the solution was really expensive, and the thought was it didn't need to be that detailed or expensive. So cost being an issue, and I know that that's not something that the people in town ignore as decisions are being made. So I really am trying to avoid any one of these things. I think there could be a whole rabbit hole conversation. So it's not something that I'm against, but at the same time, I think adding things in there just creates an endless conversation as well. So that it would just be more of a caution than anything. And that's why I'm focused more on the recommended actions. And I think that we're going to get tedious there. But for me, and in my first year on the commission, it took me a while to the way that I read the plan is the plan sets the intent, and then the bylaws, when you're discussing changes and that sort of thing, you should go with the intent. And to me, this reads as I can get the spirit of what is being requested here, and then the recommended actions as you get into the detail is, here are suggestions for how this might be done. And if a suggestion is new people to town need to give up their firstborn or something, okay, no, that's bad. You don't do that. But seeing the spirit of we're looking at multimodal options to reduce the reliance on automobiles and reduce speeds and that sort of thing, and get better interconnection between neighborhoods. I don't see. I suppose I see the concern, but I'm wondering if this is a hedge against, say the town gets a grant for $1 million and somebody's just, the assumption is someone's going to go nuts and say, okay, we're going to put paths everywhere and claim eminent domain, and this is going to be amazing because it's in our town. Like, is that, that's a little extreme, but is that what we're trying to avoid?
Steve Mayfield again. I don't want to answer for everybody, but where I'm coming from on this is at the last meeting when the whole Bay Road project was being, a couple of words from Gary before he left struck home, which was, then you should have been here when we were writing the plan, because the plan says bikes first and cars second, and houses third. Okay. It was really what the words came out of his mouth is the select board sat there and said, you should have been here when we wrote the plan. So you're kind of writing the plan right now, and we're concerned that it's going to say people first, bikes second, cars third, houses last.
I don't see that at all.
I don't, but I wasn't here when they wrote the last plan, and I didn't read that in the last plan either. And that's what we were told it said. Those were the words that came out of him when we were all complaining about saying, you know, where's this coming from? This isn't the place to do it. You should have been here when we wrote the plan.
I don't have the context of that conversation. That sounds very odd to me. Not to say that that didn't happen. I don't know the greater context to that. I haven't been a part of any conversation where we've outright been putting bikes or pedestrians first. It's more of there's an obvious need for roads and cars, but we also want to make sure that there are other ways of getting around that aren't just cars.
Absolutely, and I'm not against the bike paths. I'm not against the changes, and I'm sure most of the people on Bay Road would love to have walking paths for the kids and everything, and everybody who lives on Spinnaker in that area. It was just that presentation stuck with me from that last meeting. And
as well. Yeah.
When it turned around and said, you should have been here for the planning then, this isn't where we do the planning, this is just where we decide whether or not we're going to spend the money on the plan. So
can I say that I have been, as the person kind of spearheading this, writing this transportation section, and a resident of Yacht Haven who was horrified by what was presented. I've been writing this in the spirit of trying to get a reset, you know, to go back on that. I don't know what Gary said. I don't remember hearing that, but that's certainly not the spirit in which we're approaching any of this. We're trying to figure out the balance. We have, we want to be able to walk and bicycle more safely in the town. Some of that's going to occur on the roads by adapting, adding facilities, by adapting them, maybe with conditions that would, like on Bay Road, make it a lot safer for people to get their mail, for example, with not feeling like, they're taking their lives into their hands. Yeah, I mean, some things like that too, I would hope would be side effects. And also trying to encourage more community support and awareness of the benefits of having a connected network of trails that also go off the road too. So we can have more tie hall things and that sort of thing that add so much to livability, quality of life, and frankly are going to raise our property values at the end of the day, because this is the kind of community where people want to live. We have this incredible scenery here and so many wonderful things. I mean, your store is an example of, one of the many things that's so great about this town. So it's trying to find the right balance and not wreck the character of the place at the same time. But, things are changing, and, I believe many people in this town don't want to continue with as much car orientation as we have. I mean, that's a sentiment that we hear a lot. So, so anyway, please consider this as a kind of an olive branch reset, whatever you want to see it in. And we do not at all endorse what went down earlier.
No, we appreciate that, but that's where the words feasible, practical, these types of words are coming from. Is on the last plan. They considered that reasonable and practical when they had bike paths going across somebody's front window and saying, this was a feasible plan, this is practical, we've seen this elsewhere. So we're trying to get those words in there so it's not just, the town is, trying to make this bike safe at all costs. We're trying to make sure the at all cost part of it is softened.
Part of the reason being a little more, you might say, strict,
yep,
is so that this is what guides the regs that are going to be written afterwards, zoning. So the advice that you got is partly good. Being here is really good in having this input, but to keep coming and help us when we write the zoning, because the zoning is really the bones of what's going to go in here. But we can't do certain kinds of zoning if we don't have language that's very clear and precise. So that's why the plan has to be precise. So I think we're in agreement with your position, but come to the zoning portions of this too, and when we get to that phase, and that's where the real language gets written, because zoning is what sets the pace. The town plan just sets us up so that we can write zoning.
Zoning is what's legally binding in the end. So, we're just setting up a framework that will lead us to better outcomes.
So we're almost off the first page. I would like to keep this document, regardless of what goes in or doesn't. There's definite value to keep that with this document. So, I know I have a copy of it now, and that'll be something, not as part of this discussion necessarily, but I do want to make sure that supporting inputs and things that have gone into the plan, that those can be there for reference, because there are a lot of times where we've gotten into discussions and we say, well, this happened and this is why we have this topic now, and usually Dean is the encyclopedia that fills in the gaps. So having these sorts of things is really good. All right, so page 1, paragraph 4, and adding a section F for placemaking principles that preserve and protect scenic views of property owners. I don't disagree with that. I think that's a dangerous thing to put in there, though. I can certainly see that from both sides, and my personal view is how the town uses scenic views to inhibit, to a degree, solar installations, for example. And the example that I use is I went on a site visit with the select board a year or two ago to the solar orchard at Shelburne Farms. And the questions I was hearing was, okay, so this can't be seen from that road over there or from those houses. And to me, there are worse things to see than a solar panel. Now, I understand how somebody else could say, well, no, I don't want to see that. But there's a big difference between having a solar panel right outside somebody's window, because that's over the property line, versus something that's 100 yards away and you can kind of see it if you look through the trees really close. To me, that's not a reason to not do something like that. And so I definitely get a little defensive around those things, because I think we carry it too far. And that's why I feel like any of these points could be a big rabbit hole, but it's good to note. Is there a particular example around that, or a Gesundheit, or a deeper concern around the protecting scenic views of property owners? Because
I don't know if anybody has actually walked down Bay Road where they're thinking of putting a bike path or sidewalk, but I know if it goes 15 feet into the yards, it'll be taking down maybe 100 trees on Bay Road, and that's really concerning to me. That's our scenic view. That's the people's scenic view of our houses, too. We haven't talked about trees ever before.
There's a lot about trees in, well, I know form-based zoning doesn't apply to Bay Road necessarily, but the transportation section does, and future land use.
That would be a contextual feature that would be, that would inform what you do in a setting like that. I mean, maybe you can have sidewalks that you see them all around. Sometimes the sidewalk, there's a green space between the road and the sidewalk. And other places, the sidewalk is closer to the road, and there's just a curb right there to separate it. There's different ways to handle that, And I would think that preserving big trees and things like that would be something that would be, a priority. But the point is to, if you look through the recommendations and objectives, which are, how we take action on these goals that we're setting, it talks about context-sensitive manuals for achieving this, and that's where you get into the nitty-gritty in the zoning. But this is what enables us to pursue that, because if we just were to just do that out of nothing, we could be challenged that this is not representative of the community's vision, So we have to be, this is why we proceed, as Dick was saying, with the town plan first. So I think, further down in the language does speak to those qualitative things that are so important, and believe me, we're all very aware of how disturbing the presentation last year was for the proposals for Bay Road. So that's not what we have in mind.
Which I also recognize isn't always a good consolidation or consolation prize. Trying to understand objective 2, the page 1, paragraph 6, which is on page 2 now. But objective 2,
I'm having a hard time tracking.
Page 1, paragraph 6, objective 2?
Yeah.
It's on the first page of the revised document. And I think it's a typo. It's under objectives, and number 2, at the very end of the sentence that starts, pursue transportation planning
pursue transportation planning in conjunction with community character, and then it's DESIFORE.
Oh, yeah, that may have been corrected.
Oh, okay.
It's,
so just,
yeah,
I just have of the setting.
Desired for.
Yeah, because now it says.
Desired for.
Yeah, desired for that setting.
Oh.
Okay.
Place desired for that.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. And then paragraph 7, recommended actions, which one was that? 4.
Is that vote begins on a regular basis?
Yes.
I don't see existing and proposed. Oh, there. Oh, here.
Yes, it's at the.
Yeah, I got it.
So I'm taking out the words existing and proposed from that sentence. So it just reads, update the map of Shelburne's bicycling and pedestrian facilities network.
And the fear is that, I know one of my friends and neighbors, Michael Regan, caused a lot of controversy by sending these letters of, do you know a path is going across your yard?
Well,
which was not true, really. It was just in this, we want to connect these areas, you know, and you have to draw a line on a map somewhere. They weren't saying the path will go here. They're saying this, you know, this neighborhood needs to connect over to that road. And they just, you know, at some point you have to draw a line somewhere. So, I mean, I guess, I don't know that there's any proposed map of bike paths that explicitly puts any piece of property in danger, because the process would be, you know, it would go from this idea of connecting these to then saying, okay, getting both groups to agree that they want a path there. Because we went through this with our neighborhood connecting to the Heights. How would we do it? Where would we go? You know, and it kind of went in. There was some neighbors were unhappy. We kind of built a compromise, and it ended up going in there. So, you know, just because someone draws a line on a map, I don't think means that that person's house is definitely having a path going through their backyard.
So
does that make sense?
Well, it does to the degree, though, but in 2014 and 2016, when it was an issue with the Bike and Path Committee, it really centered around once the map is drawn, then if a party wants to sell their property, they have to disclose that this is in discussion for whatever the map is depicting,
right.
And it would have a detrimental value on the property. And so since then...
Just a second, I'm sorry, I got to interrupt. Could you cite the studies that are going to prove that the path is going to diminish values? Because I'll give you a bigger stack that proves that it'll add value.
But they'd have, but for us...
Yeah, but you just don't make a gross generalization that it's going to diminish values.
Yeah, I mean, I just know when we moved in our neighborhood, I was excited that there were other paths that were going to connect our neighborhood to other parts that were proposed, because I looked at that as that's going to make my property more valuable, and that's much safer for my kids and more exciting.
It was in your front yard, coming into your
No,
front
it was
yard?
connecting, right.
That's different. That is
Right.
different.
But I don't know that anybody's ever proposed a path, you know, in someone's front yard. I mean, that's what I'm saying. These maps, again, it was a line drawn on an area connecting to, and people assumed, oh, my house is right there, that's going to go through my yard, but that was never intended by that map.
Yeah, so
The lines are drawn down roads as opposed to on people's property, saying this is where we would like to put a proposed path.
Well, I
And
mean, in
then-
these cases,
then
some of them were
details are
paths where
worked.
there were no roads, right? So it was connecting like a end of a cul-de-sac onto another road. You know, so the end of the cul-de-sac in our neighborhood, you know, connecting to the very end of Long Meadow, for example.
I kind of
There's a dirt path that people use, but
I guess I'm a little partial to this argument because I live on a river, and a while back they tried to place a trail along the riverbank. My house is approximately 100 feet. That's my living room. And I didn't want that line. I argued against it for that very reason. And So I think I understand this position.
Well, but I guess what I'm saying, there's always going to be a proposed paths map, right?
The problem is once a map gets approved, as an approved proposed, then we went by the interpretation, well, it can't be built until it's funded, but it can be proposed and funded from that point. And there has been an attempt to do that. And there was a discussion 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm not sure which. No, not mine. It never did take off.
So for this point though, to me, I don't, removing the words existing and proposed, I don't think that hurts any efforts for anybody trying to plan paths between neighborhoods or anything else if that's gonna just solve this. So updating that map is fine, and recognizing that there will always be processes in place to explore expansion of paths and that sort of thing. But I think your concern is that if there's a regular update to proposed paths, then that could potentially impact somebody who's trying to sell their house. If an arbitrary line, I don't think that impacts anything.
The houses on Bay Road aren't 100 feet from the proposed paths. Some people are going to lose their parking places. It's different. We don't have huge lawns on Spear Street.
Right, and I imagine that there were lots of arguments when they widened Route 7 from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and people said, well, you're going to eat into my space, but there was that greater,
they have a greater distance. We're a little old road.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that's recommended action 4. So then objectives 2, the growth areas are they're defined in detail in the land use section that we might get to a little bit later. But growth area 1 is effectively the village center. Growth area 2, consider it the sewer area. And the highest density for the highest density should be the village center, and then the next highest should be the growth area, and then we also have commercial districts, and then you get into rural, which should have the least amount of development. But then there are maps and things that are certainly accessible.
If you're in a sewer district, you're in a growth area of some sort.
Yeah. And then objective 3. Are we on? Shall I use? I don't know that I'm in the right space. Yeah. Maybe that's 4. Yeah. Okay. Shall establish policy. Shall use placement criteria.
So it's the objective.
So that would be here.
The Shelburne Bike Pedestrian Paths Committee.
It's now objective 4 on the doc. We're
Yes.
working with here, so I think it's.
Oh, I see.
So it would be that Shelburne Bicycle and Peds Path Committee shall use placemaking criteria to establish policy. Then I guess we wouldn't need that criteria, right, to establish policy?
Right.
To guide how the...
We could say to establish town policy. I think that just needs to be re-wordsmith potentially.
Shall use placemaking criteria to establish town policy. Guide.
So we suggested adding placemaking as a word there only because that kind of captures what you've been trying to, using placemaking as a big overarching umbrella, and that will guide that committee in doing it rather than just establishing what they envision.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works. Do you just, if you are thinking rewording, do you just want to make a comment?
Yeah.
To revisit the flow of it? And I'll accept that.
I can accept my own, can I?
Oh, you should be able to. This is... I wasn't... I fell off of accepting changes here, so let's see, we've got formats. Okay. All right, so that was placemaking, then objective 3.
This next one is within that same. It's probably number 4 now still, and it's.
Yeah, is that? I actually had a question there because there was well, I don't know about grants, funds, or studies. I know that there's something in place if you're an adjacent property owner to something where there's a development change that's under discussion, because I've received those in the past, but I don't.
That's a result of the zoning regulations.
Right, but I think to have, I could certainly see the argument on both sides to say that if there's going to be a grant request for, or a request for funding to do a study on a particular area that abuts a particular property, you're not going to know the outcome. I mean, I don't know. I see the concern, but at the same time, you don't want something shot down before it's been investigated, kind of thing.
I think it just asks.
But it's an awareness.
An awareness, just to be alerted.
How? And really, it's more of a mechanical thing at this point. So what is that? Is that a thing? Like, I think of the studies that happen for form-based zoning and stuff. If there was a study to investigate that whole corridor, would then all residents or businesses along that corridor need to be made aware that there's a study being taken because the town's looking at?
Kate and I, many years ago, worked on the application that brought the team of architects here that led to the recommendation that, set the stage for form. So I think that idea might have never gotten off the ground. That study might never have been done if we'd had to contact every property owner in the Route 7 corridor. I mean, some of this is a question of when is it appropriate for that to happen, or when is it necessary to happen? When you get a notice for a zoning hearing that the DRB is doing, that could be very real. Someone has developed a plan and they're going to go to the board to get some approval, and you as a neighbor hear about it. And indeed, when the Planning Commission was developing the form-based zoning bylaw, then a mailing was done because you were actually putting together something that was the regulation. The idea of having an obligation, a mandate to contact everyone and varying interpretations of what that could mean, it's like you say, it could mean that there's the defeat of an idea before it has any chance to study it. And as a policy for the town, you have to ask yourselves, well, if it's appropriate for that group, well, what other efforts? Is it appropriate, where's Gail? Is it appropriate for the Natural Resources Committee to be considering conserving a property without contacting all the neighbors first? Because if that was a requirement, there wouldn't be conserved land. Or groups independent of the paths committee would form to create these plans.
So where's the middle ground then potentially between, because I think there's definitely a sensitivity towards things happening without your knowledge. So the process is where in the process? I mean, it sounds like seeking grants or studies probably is not the time, but once grants and studies have been done and now this is being proposed, that's when you guys need to know, right? So.
But that's also when I've seen announcements.
All the money on the grant.
Okay, so if there's...
So much money
Well, these things we're not that powerful as the Planning Commission or the PATHS Committee or anything. I mean, we have to get the Select Board to allow us to do this. All we can do is go and recommend, say we think there's an opportunity here, we support this, and that's all noticed on their agendas. So, some of this is you have to actually pay attention and read some of the agendas, just like you guys have been doing, to know to come and participate in these discussions. So, that grant that was gotten for the fiasco on Bay Road was, that would have been discussed by the select board, to get the go ahead to go pursue that. Yeah, I mean, you just have to, and again, a study is just a study, so it's not, it can result in terrible ideas. Sometimes can result in fantastic ideas, but yeah, I would think that the greater community good of increasing safety on a road like Bay Road and how to do it should not be something that a couple of residents get to say, you know what, we're shutting this down, because it's something that everybody who lives in that area should be able to participate in. So, I mean, I can't support suggesting that the language that was suggested, that,
Upon receiving and drop the studies. So it would be upon receiving grants or funds, so that if...
Absolutely, because we would want people to come and participate and say...
Upon receiving the grant, before the actual work is done, but we at least know that there's work being done at that point.
I think what my hang-up is it's notifying all of the adjacent properties, because if you're talking about a very isolated single thing where you've got a couple of properties right there, that's one thing. But if you're talking about something big like the Route 7 corridor, that's a bureaucratic thing that would prohibit it in the first place, to contact everybody. Like, I feel like, to your point, and maybe this needs to be called out or be made very explicit, where there's a particular section on the town website, or maybe that's a recommended action to say that any grants applied for or whatever should be noted here. I don't know if there's a public disclosure thing on that needs to happen anyway.
There's not a dedicated section of the website, but there could be, I guess.
Yeah, it's more that. I mean, what I'm hearing is that there needs to be awareness, and I would agree. If there's something that's going to be impacting an area that I'm in, I would want to know about that. But at the same time, if part of that is on me, just to be generally aware of what's going on, and that's a lot easier actually being a member on the planning commission.
I think we try and capture that with the last sentence that does exist too, right? That this information is being made public, available through maps and other documents. And maybe that can be made more explicit, that sentence, in terms of...
Is there any reason it can't be published? Just a notice published from Porch Forum once the grant has been acquired.
Because, I mean, as Kate said, or someone had said, agendas, it is the select board that decides. The select board's agendas are in fact published on the town's website, and there are documents that support each of the agenda items that are also on the website. So when there's an agenda, like there will be in 2 meetings in June, when the select board is asked to authorize the grant application for the Irish Hill Road sidewalk project, that'll be on the agenda. And then when you go to the agenda and you click on that part of the agenda, it'll take you to a memo that's going to be written that will say to the select board, this is what you're being asked to do. Here are additional links for more information, and so on. I mean, that stuff is fairly common. You can go on, I did this just the other day, looked up an old select board agenda for a grant application, and those things are still there all this time later. A copy of the draft application was part of the packet.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we could, if this gets to some of...
And by the way, you lack your quorum, just, so you've lost your quorum.
Okay.
So, I mean, don't make any heavy lifts right now. But you can keep, going informally, but...
Fair enough.
I guess we take it for granted. I took it for granted. I don't read the select board warnings anymore, but they are published on a regular basis, and probably that's, if we have some solid advice, is to read those, look in the mirror and read them when I go home.
Yeah, I need to do that too. Just for orientation, before Andrew gets back, what the page 2, last paragraph, objectives 1, is that the one, let's see, just lost it.
Yes, to remove
as
the wording
depicted.
that references the bike and pedestrian
Committee's comprehensive map.
Which is, I think I lost where.
I'm wondering if we could put something in about encouraging, resident outreach in the process by making people aware when a grant has been received. I mean, some of this can be handled by things like an art, which is, I've rejoined the Paths Committee, and I was talking with them about this the other night when we met. Like we should start writing in the Shelburne News about what we're doing. I mean, that's a really great, easy way, and probably more appealing than having to read agenda items and follow all that sort of thing, and just sort of like what we're trying to do. Because if we're really wanting to pursue a place-based approach to solving these problems, we absolutely want the input of the residents. We don't want what we had last time, which is, some people who are not from here, who don't know what we want, saying, well, you can do this or this or this, and yes, I share your exasperation. It was we wanted none of their ideas, and it seemed like a waste of money. So, but I would encourage you to just think of it as hopefully that's a kind of a one-off. Most of these things are actually much more productive and just done better. So. Well, anyway, that's what we intend in the future, and I think gaining we want people. We would like an outcome where people think this is going to be an asset to the neighborhood, and that's what we're shooting for, rather than shoving things down people's throats.
And I see that's also been reworded. So it still has depict at the beginning of the sentence.
Right.
I think, you see, I'm just catching up on some of the edits here. So let's see. So if I clean this up.
So one of the reasons for doing that was to show, we thought it would be very helpful to show where we have existing infrastructure, and then so people can start to see where we have gaps. And then we can start to talk about how we bridge those gaps. And, that could happen in different ways. But just to identify where there's a gap, get people to provide input on how they feel about that. Is that a problem? Are some gaps worse than others? That kind of thing. And then we can start to kind of prioritize, because it costs money to do all this stuff.
So this is, as depicted. Okay, so this is the, and is the Bike and Pedestrians Committee comprehensive map, is that something, I'm not familiar with those mechanics. Is that something that they're regularly just?
They have a map, and this is an idea that got into the plan, I think, the last time that it was updated, or it made more explicit recognition of the committee's role in developing a map. So years ago, the plan might have said something like, depict all existing and planned sidewalk paths and trail projects on a town bike and ped map. But more recently, the role was assigned to the Bike and Ped Committee to be the developers and refiners of that map. And in the text that was commented on by the Paths Committee, I think they see themselves as continuing to have that role. It is a document that they have, and it's so you have the regulations, which are mandatory, you have plans, which are aspirational advisory, and then sometimes you have these things that are below plans that are more in the level of a policy or a proposal. Now, when it's a committee document and it's a proposal, it's a proposal. But if it's incorporated into the plan, into the town plan, then its importance is elevated. So one of the things that's incumbent on the Paths Committee is, as part of this plan update process, to get you an updated version of the map that will be the map in the town plan. What they work on as the Bike and Ped Committee map is something that they keep more up to date in the years following the adoption of the plan. It's just that the plan, the town plan, doesn't get adopted and updated nearly as often. So they have a document that they think of as a more useful document because it can be kept up to date.
Which, as an objective, is just to say that that map should be kept up to date.
With the plan. We should review or they should bring their changes in periodically so that we can.
Well, I think one of the ideas, and maybe this is an assurance to the residents, or maybe not, but with language like this, people should know that if the plan is being fulfilled and they want to know where all the ideas are for planned facilities, they get a copy of that map. And if it's something that's not on that map, then it would, I think, be judged as less of a valid idea or tested idea because it hasn't gotten to the point where it's on that map. But when you see that map, something that's there, you should be paying attention that it could be pursued or studied further.
But whatever version of that map, if it's even included in the town plan to begin with, I mean, to me, this is an objective saying that A, there is a bike and pedestrian committee, and B, that they have a map that they maintain.
Yeah, there is a committee and they do have a map, but they know that they need to update it. And they're in the process of updating it. And when they update it, I think they will be bringing it to you as something that would be included as one of the maps in the town plan. So then it would have kind of this dual role. For a time, they would be the same. The committee map and the map would be in the town plan.
But that'll morph.
But when the town plan is adopted and 2 years go by, they'll have an updated version of theirs, and they'll be different.
I'm not sure where that leaves us.
Where it leaves us is we should be reviewing that map every couple of years or something, at least to maintain it.
Yeah, I
and
get
updated.
I'm trying to balance, because this also goes back, I imagine that it has to do with the comment of existing and planned. So if you have that on a map and you don't really want that line on the map,
for their map to be authentic or to be good, the material on it should be pushed back through us for approval, right? Where would the map standing be if only the bike committee
Only the Paths Committee
knows about it?
Whatever they want. And, and if it doesn't have any kind of recognition, then it's just a committee tool. But if it's recognized in some other way, the language in the plan is giving it some recognition as the place that you go to find all the ideas for paths at a point in time.
Should we just, like the comprehensive map, as reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission or something, to add some kind of qualifier on that? I think is what I'm hearing from you, maybe.
There should be some sort of encouragement they would want their map to be authentic, active, current, whatever, accepted as a rule, right? So it would be incumbent upon them to come to us and say, okay, we made some changes, we review it periodically to keep it updated.
Yes, because I attended the April meeting. It was on their agenda. I didn't see a map. Dean brought samples of maps and suggestions, and then the meeting ended, and no one was willing, it's in the minutes, you could read it, no one was willing to take that as a project, and I assumed it was anticipating that the project would be completed, and they would take the next step that Dick just described. They would have something they could turn to you, and that would be of interest, of course, to everyone in town. They'd like to know, where is the plan going? I want the sidewalk on my street. I want to see that map, so.
working on the map is a huge undertaking. And so we just decided to start working on that, and I volunteered to take the lead on that. So, but nothing's happened so far. We just made a decision to start working on it, and we're aware that we need to get cracking because of the time constraints. So, but it's, and again, it's just, I'm just going to be, I guess, overseeing the process, but it's going to be the decision of everybody on the PATHS committee.
Does that language clarify, though, just to add as reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission? Because I think that addresses, Dean, what you're talking about, where we could inadvertently have language in there, and then not that there would be like a mutiny, and the PATH committee says, because Objective 2 says this, now our map is gold. Like, basically, the point being is that there are checks and balances. That committee would put a map together that then gets reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission, and then before any action got taken on new stuff, that would need to go through the Select Board and that process.
Absolutely. There's been stuff, there's the Long Meadow Hillcrest path that has existed for, how long has that been in existence? Yeah, I mean, over
2004 was when the study.
Yeah, I mean, and that is, and is anyone familiar with any of this? No, I mean, most of it doesn't exist. Yeah, I mean,
I was excited about it.
Yeah, most of it doesn't actually exist, because, and I mean, the portion of it that does exist that everybody is familiar with is going down Webster Road, that's one segment of it that exists. But there are like, I don't know, 5 segments or something like that. And one of the reasons it doesn't exist is because it costs money to implement it, and who's in charge of that? Again, we're not that powerful. It's the Select Board. So, and deciding to make it a priority. Gail, did you want to?
I'm just wondering if adding something like a conceptual path map would ease people's concerns, knowing that concept is there. Maybe there's a dot at the beginning and a dot at the end, but you're not drawing a line that goes through anybody's property.
Right. I mean, I personally, I'm more in favor of identifying the destinations that we would like to be able to walk and bicycle to, and how that is achieved. First of all, in most instances, there are a couple different ways to sort of skin that particular cat, and they involve getting the permission of property owners and all of that kind of stuff. And the PATHS committee got into big trouble a couple of years ago because they did just kind of put some lines down and didn't make that distinction. So that would be something that I would not, that's a mistake I don't need to, repeat. Let's put it that way. I don't think anybody on the PATHS committee needs to either. So yeah, there are different ways to do that, but I think you're right, just showing conceptually, how this might be achieved. And then we need to have community conversations about it, because, what a bunch of people on the PATHS committee and in this room think are priorities, that might not be what the community thinks is a priority. So, I'm personally in favor of a lot more outreach, a lot more, and we can do a lot of that pretty easily these days. There's surveys, there's all different ways to get people's input on things.
So I want to make sure that, unless we just make a comment to revisit this. So I did add the as reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission, but then Dick, you were talking about adding something to clarify enforcement?
No, enforcement. Just to encourage planning, or the map folks to run it in front of us periodically, so it's maintained, it's updated with the plan. I don't know if it's an annual review or, if they make changes, if they don't make any changes, then fine.
Right, and I think that's where I just want to make sure, and maybe this alleviates some concerns, that it's not that there's a committee that just puts a map together and then because a line went somewhere, that's the way it's going to be. Like that's one step in a multi-step process where there's ample opportunity for the public to join in as well, and all these things get warned. So this has been a struggle on this plan in every section, to not get carried away with trying to protect against every circumstance, because there are some built-in things. And I know that this is probably more sensitive because of things around railroad and other things that happened, and it's good for this awareness to be there, I think. And I appreciate the engagement.
So the paths committee that caused all the problems for a bunch of people was actually approved by the planning commission and then sent on to the select board. And that was where, everything went ballistic, you know. So, so no, they can't just make changes. Everything has to come through us. We're the gatekeepers. And then the select board is the ultimate gatekeeper.
Shane, I would support what Gail was suggesting, and Kate seemed to be supportive of it. The idea it's conceptual, so that you're just talking about your destinations on either side. So then I don't know, as a realtor, Dick, you could say, that way the homeowner doesn't feel that they have to show the map to say this is what could happen to this property.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's all. I think that might help you, because I think that's where we were coming from.
Unless there's a map that's showing something that is going to be developed, you don't really have to
You're not
disclose.
forced to. Okay, good.
You shouldn't have to disclose it unless it's an approved project.
Because I think we're going on what Michael Reagan did. So
Or
that
if there's a proposed project, you might want to disclose a proposed project as well.
I was just wondering the same thing, and then you would know, as a real estater.
In general. Generals, be very careful. Disclose.
Everything, right?
So I mean, is this worth before, instead of all existing and planned sidewalk, path, and trail projects have conceptually planned or something? Because that doesn't mean that it's happening. And I'm kind of thinking also, because we're going to have the same issue with housing when we talk. In the plan, I think we worked around it, but when you talk about the idea of hamlets, and I know that was a struggle on the subcommittee to say, well, we could say this area is good for a hamlet and whoever lives in that area is going to freak out. But the idea is more to get the concept down and identify, well, where might this be feasible? It's not to say this is what we're going to do and we're going to overhaul everything. It's more trying to figure creative solutions to problems that we know we have in the rural area.
I'm trying to get us past this, but is there any advantage to simply saying depict existing and planned sidewalk, path, and trail projects on a map, period? That's signifying the idea that there should be an objective to put all these things on a map and just leave it at that?
I think the big issue is we definitely want to make sure we understand the baseline, right? So you could separate the two things. So, depict all existing sidewalk, path, and trails, and, on the same or a different map, have a conceptual map of future improvements, so that, because one of the key things we want to talk about is we need to look at what we have and then see the gaps. So
they had a map that showed approved and proposed at one time. I don't know if that still exists. Or.
Yeah.
That's what that map is, I think.
Yeah, the thing that I wouldn't want to have end up happening by a rewrite is to essentially frustrate the Bike and Paths Committee's efforts to do what they were created to do.
Right.
You don't want to make it so darn hard that nobody wants to be on that committee doing it.
But I think you could have two, it wouldn't be a bad thing to have a map that's just everything that exists today.
Yeah, and that's non-controversial, right?
And then have a map that says, okay, and here's how we would fill the gaps.
Yeah.
What does planned denote? The word planned.
Good point.
That's,
right.
I think that's where the sticking is. Does planned mean planned or thought of?
Right, planned until we have a budget, or this is a consideration.
Because it's coming out of the path committee, so it's.
Would proposed make you feel better?
I think proposed or conceptual, as opposed to the word planned really means planned.
That's a very good point.
That's. I think looking at that word scares me.
Proposed.
Yeah.
Because they either exist or they don't exist, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't exist, and we would like them to exist, they're proposed because they still don't exist, right?
Well, planned is the status, right? At some point, the Webster Road became planned. It went from proposed to planned. But that's what we're trying to.
planned coming out of a committee as opposed to planned coming out of a select board is a very different thing. So that
Right.
word scares me if it's planned.
Yeah, right, I agree. I think you're right,
Well, and
proposes,
it's more reflective of the actual, you know,
is what they do.
complete lack of power that, I mean, is really, we have, because everything is through the select board. I mean, that's our governmental model, right? So all we can do is, you know, beg and request and suggest.
That the bicycle committee's map gets put as part of the plan, and then it's a planned route going into the plan. It's a lot of words that have plan in them.
Yeah. It only starts to have any kind of legal standing if it's approved by the select board, you know.
People really think that proposed gets us out of this? The problem, the concerns? If people think that, then great. I'm not sure that I see much. Well, I guess I'm trying to get a handle on the concern. Is the concern that there will be something left off that map and there'll be a gotcha?
No, well, the reason I think proposed solves it.
But I think the other thing we gotta remember is this is a objective, and then we've got 3 recommended actions that kind of touch on all these things. And I think we kind of flush it out later, so like, I think it does. I think that wording works great, and then later we get into real specifics, which include, we talk about providing a map that shows existing stuff so that we can encourage bicycle tourism. We have a official map that proposes, you know, easements showing like what's available to be built, and then one that talks about kind of pie in the sky ideas,
So in order to get past this, are we good with removing the specific committee call out in the beginning part? And then I added for when they're preparing input to the town's capital budget so that it doesn't read as if they are preparing the budget.
Sure.
If those are good, then I think we're all right. Okay, and then was there, the next one was recommended action 6. And I don't,
This refers to the location of easements on that official map.
okay.
The reason we were saying that we thought that section should perhaps be taken out right now is because specifically, if you look at Bay Road, there are different parts of the road where there's a 3-rod road, and then it becomes a 4-rod road, and then so when the plan was put forward on Bay Road, the whole road was said it was 4-rod road. So it's just that needs to be decided. You know, is it a 4-rod road? Is it a 3-rod road? So if you just go without, you need to include the homeowners on trying to figure out, well, you know, you don't have the easements that you thought you had.
I just need to point out that that's not correct. That there was a part of the document that did make reference to a 4-rod road, but the plans did not assume that the entire corridor was 4 rods. That's a misstatement.
Okay.
Well, the engineer was asked that same question during the various meetings, and she defended her that it would be the whole road was a 4-rod road in her plan. And then that same night, as the Tool plan, and that same night, there were at least 2 homeowners who disputed that. And that was, you know, the May 8th or 9th meeting of last year.
And the architect just said the town told us it was a 4-rod road. She just said that during the meeting.
So what's in, forgive my ignorance, I'm not familiar with the rod.
16 feet.
Oh, just meaning, gotcha. Okay.
66.
So is this, so when talking about location of easements, what's the suggestion here? Are you looking to remove that?
Yes.
Or an easement map?
Easements don't have anything to do with the right-of-way.
That's why I'm confused.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around the whole concept here.
Yeah, this is really pertaining to in places where it's undeveloped, large tracts of undeveloped land, and they would like to put in a new subdivision. We want to make sure we get an easement for a bicycle trail or walking trail or something like that as part of that. So it doesn't have really anything to do with the road right-of-ways, which is what I think
Okay,
you're.
great, thank you.
Thank you for that. 'cause
Yeah.
That's where I was a little confused.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, it's out in, it's how do we knit together connectivity in various different ways? And so we have received easements from property owners for various purposes over the years, and we a bit here and a bit there, and so if there's something that is in between that the person wants to develop, this is a perfect opportunity to make a connection. Maybe these are like you're connecting 3 neighborhoods or something like that. So it's just.
And that's also, just so that I can accept some of these changes, that's also what number 8 is to talk about specifically requiring dedication of easements.
Yes.
Well, but this
At least when they're along highway. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but like, is there any controversy around those points?
No, and that would be for to give us the opportunity to plan ahead for a path or probably in a rural area, a multi-purpose path in the future. Like if you don't secure those opportunities at the time of development, it's very difficult to get them back again.
Did you make these changes one word at a time? Okay, so this.
I'm just going to ask about time. You're at 8:30, and you got these comments just before the meeting, and I don't know whether or not you want to keep plowing ahead, or is this something that you want to?
Well, I think at this point there's 3 comments left, so I think it'd be worth just getting through this document to address these, and then some of the other comments that we had. I know we're about halfway through the document. Let's see, I'll just try and hit these specifically. So the next one was objective 5. While recognizing, and that's on the next page, so I guess I could come back.
To ensure the overall roadway system. That one?
Yes.
Why do you want to get rid of the town's role within the larger region?
It's kind of nebulous. What is our role within the larger region?
I don't like that either.
No, I was just trying to understand, because I mean, I think what we were trying to say was more that instead of just being completely Shelburne focused, understanding what's happening in our neighboring towns and make sure that, if they're building paths or, that we can see how we all connect, but yeah, it's a little vague.
How about recognizing connections with other towns?
Yeah, or the town's connection points with
Potential.
neighboring towns or something like that.
There's also,
Is that right? Is that what we're trying to capture?
Yeah, and it's also kind of to recognize that, people commute through Shelburne, I mean, we're, like it or not.
So this is, okay. So how would you, what's a suggestion for?
Maybe something like,
Recognizing potential connections within the region.
Or is that last part even needed at all?
yeah, I think that's what Steve's
I mean,
saying.
yeah, evolve to meet the needs of the community as it hits growth targets. I mean, I think, I don't know that we need
Right.
to overcomplicate that.
Fine.
Good move.
Take it out of plan.
I only need to cut about 30 or 40 more pages like that, so
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
keep going. Okay, and then, let's see, getting close. So the next one is recommended actions number 2. Add the word historic village.
survey residents about the historic village, what improvements to the historic village they would like? I assume that was what this section was going at.
We were actually thinking about everywhere in the town. You know, just townwide, what they would like. Just to not make the presumption that we necessarily know. I mean, just, you know.
Well, and also throughout the plan, one of our big concerns is the fact that there's been so much development in the rural areas, and there's this desire to protect it. So also, you know, what do they want to preserve? You know, so again, you can't necessarily make presumptions about, like, I might have a view of what I love about the rural parts of town, but, you know, is that valuable to everybody? So it wasn't just, I think we weren't just keeping it narrow to the village.
Yeah, my view on a lot of this is anything we can do to encourage participation. This is great. And obviously not every conversation is going to be easy and there's going to be disagreements, but I think that having input is better than not. And a lot of times, especially on these volunteer committees, if you don't have any input, it's just a handful of volunteers doing what they think is right, and you can't please all the people all the time. So even if the discussions are difficult, I think it's worth having them. So for this point then, is there an objection to just doing surveys?
Well, the surveys have to be good, strong surveys that are not predetermined outcomes you're seeking and so forth.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, and
that's assumed.
Then those can, you can write a survey to get whatever answer you want, really. Yeah. Oh.
So what we were imagining with that is coming up with something that you could even put on Front Porch Forum, like, do you like this cross section or do you prefer this cross section? You know, and people could sort of like vote and tell us what they think in this particular area. You know, just to sort of get some feedback on that, like a visual preference survey. That's often what it's called. We did that when we were doing the visioning for the Route 7 corridor, just to kind of get some ideas on. You know, it's one thing to say that you want something different and better there. Well, what does that mean? You know, so you have to kind of get some input. And one of the things that we kept hearing was, you know, a lot of people were sort of embarrassed by the looks of Route 7, and they wanted something that was more resonant of Shelburne identity. What does that exactly mean in the context of Route 7? So we did this visual preference survey, like, you know, if these kinds of buildings started showing up, what do you think? Do you like those? Or, you know, and sort of started to get some input, which then we were able to use that information to kind of translate into the zoning bylaws that we ended up writing. So it's just starting with just getting, you know, input on a very basic level, and, you know, start to kind of craft something that is more representative of what the majority of residents want.
So is it your intention to add the historic village and to put that limitation on that sentence, or not to do that?
I was thinking that we're interested in what people want to see
more globally.
Everywhere in the town, yeah. So the historic village would be a part of that, but everywhere, because, particularly, you know, the growth areas and in the rural areas.
So I was just questioning because I don't have papers in front of me, but I'm just looking at the historic village is proposed as an addition to that sentence. Mm-hmm. And so do you want to make it more global than just the historic village?
Yes.
Yeah, as it is currently. Yeah, I don't think we should limit where we ask questions of people's opinions.
Yeah. Because then also in some ways that's kind of how we got into the problem with Bay Road, right? You know, in the village you would have the historic preservation and design review people. I mean, everything would be looked at with this super fine-tooth comb and all sorts of review and everything. But in Bay Road, you know, this kind of more top-down, less well-considered approach was used. So we would like to expand that more finer grain consideration of issues and contextual matters and that sort of thing to other parts of the town.
Yeah, I concurred with that.
Yeah.
I was questioning the limitation that I saw in the words the historic village.
Yeah.
Only because the number one there seemed to relate to, you know, the air compression breaks and the negative impacts of speed and traffic on Route 7 through the village. And I thought number two was following through on the village.
I mean, these can all be independent, just to pursue that
But why
goal.
don't we make it clear in number 2 and say everywhere in the town or something like that, you know? Just if that was something that was confusing to you, yeah.
Improvements? Are you on that spot?
Something like that,
I
yeah.
was, and then
Or just before improvements, just say town. I mean, would adding survey residents about what town improvements they would like? I think that's a general.
It's a question of geography, so survey residents throughout the town about what improvements they would like. I mean, I think Kate's point is that we want to hear from everybody. We're hearing from some others who say, focus it on the village about what they want, presumably, in that area. So is the focus the village or the focus the whole town?
Are we getting lost in semantics? Because people in the mixed use area or the commercial district, there's no residences. So who are you surveying? The business owners? Like, I think if there's a survey, it needs to be like when there was the business survey that Anne, I think, spearheaded. It went out to everybody. Like you're looking for a profile of the town, you want input. Like I think
It was, people who had businesses. It was a survey of people with businesses.
that's fair. All right, bad example. So when we have talked about, I'm a master of bad analogies as well. When we've talked in the past about having surveys or potentially doing something through the town website where there's a weekly question and advertise it and get feedback from people. The idea is to get feedback from people. Like when we were in this select board meeting and said, hey, to the select board members or members of the public, whoever's watching on TV, all 4 of you. Right, like when we said we want input, we would like engagement in this process to get your feedback. I wasn't talking to just Mike or, Joe or a particular person like that. We want input from people that would like to provide input.
Statistically significant.
Right. The more people you have, the better a solution you're going to get. Right.
Yes.
It can also slow things down, but that's government.
I think I'm on board with their last one.
Yeah.
Trees and shrubs, I like that.
I have that highlighted.
Yeah.
If we're good here with. To me, I was thinking that was getting too semantic. Surveying residents to me is not exclusive. But this one is actually 11 now, and it's the second bullet on fewer impacts to natural resources, and the suggestion was, and preserves trees and shrubs. And I don't think are there any concerns around that?
So can I just ask one question? Since the majority of new roads, if not the entirety of new roads in Shelburne, are developed by private developers, they're not town projects. Is the idea that the roads must be sited so that they avoid trees and shrubs?
I just wanted to type that in there and reread it because that thought was starting to cross my mind as well.
Well, I mean, we've been talking about this in other places, in the rural area and other things that, in terms of placemaking and site-specific development. So, yeah, I mean, I would want that to be emphasized.
Didn't we have a discussion about not having private roads at one point?
Well, they don't become public instantly. They're planned by a developer, proposed as part of a project that gets reviewed by the Development Review Board. And so I guess I'm reacting to the word shrubs maybe more than trees, because if this is taken literally and if it's taken seriously, it could mean it becomes very, very difficult to develop a road that's going to serve a new subdivision.
Well, and that's where I get into the spirit of the document, and to me, natural resources does include those things. And if we specify trees and shrubs, are we ignoring flowers and bushes and those types of things? Like, where this is one of those rabbit hole type things, whereas natural resources, and I'm also putting this in the context of how we discuss bylaws and actually have those debates and get them in place. And just having natural resources in there would bring out all of those details. And that could mean that could mean different things to different people. But I think in some cases, keeping it generic to ensure that you're addressing the topic is better than getting into more detail, which we have tended to do in a couple of places.
I think I'd somewhere end up in the middle, though. I mean, I agree that shrubs is probably a little too much, like.
Important trees, sizable
Right.
trees,
Yeah.
trees of more than something.
Like a certain diameter, yeah. In this.
Preserves
for what
mature trees, period. Something to that effect would be great.
That would, yeah.
Native species.
We're not saving the buckthorn.
Including mature trees. And
Especially mature trees.
fewer impacts to natural resources, including mature trees. So
Which
that's just like,
arguably
that's
is a
like
natural resource,
so
but-
just,
Yeah.
I mean, I
phrasing
had
somehow.
this the other day, just with an applicant in Westford. I encouraged the engineer to put a narrower, a smaller radius on a portion of the driveway in order to avoid some really beautiful old maples, which we were able to achieve by doing that. So that can certainly be done.
How about like particularly, or with special attention to mature trees or something like that? I mean, to me, including mature trees, I could say, well, of course, but what are we excluding or why? Like, it's almost like with a particular attention too, because that's a resource that you're just not going to replace, or that's very disruptive.
Okay, so with special attention to mature trees, that sounds fine.
Does that still meet the middle of the road?
Sure.
Rare and mature plants, plantings. Your rare stuff that.
You could even just say it's natural resources.
Well, I know, that's why it's.
No, like, I mean,
Or just protect natural resources in
getting
general.
longer every time.
Right. And we definitely blew past
Your hour.
time, yeah, especially, but we got through all of these items, which is good. Sure.
You still have to come back though. You still have to come back.
Does that work? Special attention to mature trees and rare species, I think.
Sure.
Okay.
Endangered.
Yes. Should I do that?
No,
All right. Okay. And yeah, I know there's more in there for sure. At least the top half of the document has most of the changes accepted, and I left a couple of the comments there. What do we think? Should we, because I don't really want to go late tonight. Do we,
Finishing kick.
right? Do we, do you just want to stay on this? I can say that for the energy section, I could show you the bullet that was added. There was one bullet just to suggest that we should add there's a recommended action to ask the select board to join VCAM, the Climate Change Action Network. But other than that, there were minor comments from before, and we basically just addressed them as discussed in the Planning Commission. For that, I would welcome, I mean, the links got sent out, so if there's any questions or comments or anything we need to discuss, we could make that a brief chat at the next one.
Or we could end the meeting early.
Well, we can't do that because land use is still something that I definitely went through it and added some comments.
You got started. Don't break early.
Right. But, I mean, we're also not, we're halfway through transportation. Like, are there some, I feel like we should at least get through the big points here. And,
Well, let's just keep on transportation. We can hit land use
yeah.
right at the beginning.
Yeah, before you leave, the one thing I was going to make a plug for is I did have a meeting with Maya Smith, and so I'm going to want to talk about some things related to the graphic design project.
Right. So we'll need a few minutes for that. And Mary, I know that you would need to go, so don't feel there's. Well, what we're talking about, I think, might not be at 9, but it will not offend anybody. Okay, so we are, I think as far as edits, we got up to page 6. So the objectives under the streets, roads, and highways, I think is where we are. Whoa, where is that? Yeah, 2 pages down. Yeah, I think it's that one where 4 is strike through. No, yeah. So, really, and maybe, Kate, this is a question for you. So on number 4, I see the encourage ride sharing is struck out. Was that added somewhere else or just?
Oh, I think it's picked up under the transit, when we discussed transit, so it just seemed.
Oh, okay. So this is somewhere in here anyway.
Yes, I was just trying to not be redundant.
Yes, okay, so you have that on the public transportation goal. So, okay, so I can accept that, that goes away. That gets accepted. That was just formatting. All right, so some of these small comments I think can just be an editing kind of thing. So the next real edit is under recommended actions.
5 and 6.
5 and 6. Yeah, so advisory shoulders. I didn't have any objections to that edit. I don't know, is speed editing a thing? Is this acceptable?
Yeah.
I don't want to.
I mean, we're basically just cleans it up so much more.
Yeah. For number 11, I just had a comment around when bridges are reconstructed, they must include facilities for pedestrian and bicycle travel on both sides of the structure. Mm-hmm. I was just thinking that may not always be practical. But so if it, and I'm thinking of that Bay Road Bridge specifically. Like, there's a finite space there.
Falls Road too.
Yeah, like even if that gets completely rebuilt, like it may only make sense to have a bike ped path on one side. I think where practical, it should be on 2 sides, but sometimes there's going to be a limitation, and I didn't want, like, I'd rather have a path than not have a project move forward because something says that it must, although I guess this is a recommended action anyway, so it's.
Well, I guess I would disagree. A bridge is such a massively, once every 100 years kind of infrastructure project that I think we want it to be designed to be multimodal and really ensure that. And also because bridges can really, particularly on Bay Road, they could, we're I hope that the bridge will actually become kind of a hanging out place. I mean, so many people like to fish there, and really just, it's beautiful, you know, it's interesting. You have watch stuff going on underneath you. I mean,
I think it depends on the bridge. If you're talking Falls Road, you're not fishing. But I can understand wanting bikes going both ways, but a good pedestrian easement, there's no pedestrian traffic really on what would be the south side, I guess.
Or say this is a separate pedestrian bridge.
Right.
And so it would handle both directions.
So maybe, I appreciate that bike lanes are necessary in two directions, but maybe not pedestrian. On some bridges, where they can be, it makes sense, like a larger bridge. So maybe we shouldn't.
So make that up with that. What are you confused about on Bay Road? You talking about the bridge that goes over the mouth of the river? Or are you talking about the railroad underpass?
Yeah, that's
which
what I was
isn't a
talking
bridge.
about.
It's an underpass.
True. Well, it's a bridge for the railroad.
Right.
the bridge at the
All that is
yeah.
doing is saying on both sides of the structure where possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably works.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was getting at. I just didn't want to lock us into a situation where somebody would argue, well, we can't do it because it's just not practical here. And I don't think that would happen, so maybe I'm the one splitting hairs.
I mean, as a biker, I don't want to have to come to the bridge and then try to figure out how to get to the other side when the traffic's coming.
Well, I mean, on a bike,
But it also depends on what you're
take the
talking about,
road.
right? Because it could be, you know, a road and there's a bike path that parallels that road,
Right.
and the bike bridge
That people
is
don't use,
part of
right.
it. Well, but the bike bridge is, you know, either an add-on or whatever. So you might not have a bike lane on one side because everybody's going both directions on the path, but.
Well, how about I'll withdraw my comment because this is a recommended action. This isn't it has to be this way, period. I mean, I know it says must, but this would be part of the discussion. And if a commission gets into a discussion around a particular example or a DRB.
What if we just deleted the yellow portion? Is that where you started?
Yeah.
That's what his comment
my comment
related
was
to.
that may not be practical if there are space constraints. One side is better than none. I'm happy to just resolve that though.
Okay, you go
Is
now.
that? You just leave it as is?
Yeah, I would request that we consider doing that.
Okay. And then on 14, these are just good readability edits.
Mhm.
So. Okay. And then, so that takes us down to the public transportation goal.
I don't think a typo above that, or was it?
What's that?
I saw a typo. Something.
And this goal basically is replacing these guys.
I have a thought about this for a long time. I've been sort of hoping that I wouldn't have to continue to see people walking along Route 7 because there's no bus to the Teddy Bear and to the motel. That's a residential motel where people live with babies. So I think that's a really important objective.
Yeah, no, I like that one. I don't like the space after it, though. Oh, that's formatting. Okay.
Isn't there a bus that goes to Teddy Bear?
There is at certain hours, yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't go the whole day, but it.
No,
Okay.
it doesn't.
And they're actually, I think, getting in sync. Bill Schuldeis has had meetings recently with Green Mountain Transit, and the last time I heard him talk, he was pretty excited about the things that they were getting lined up.
No, I see buses going by saying Teddy Bear, Teddy
Yeah,
Bear,
they
Teddy
do
Bear.
go by, but I remember being at a select board meeting and mentioning that one time when Green Mountain Transit was there. And the select board felt that it was too expensive and that they had to kick in the cost of those extra runs, and so they chose not to do it. So if it's in the plan, does it sort of, I know the select board has to approve the plan, but we have different select boards.
Yeah, I think it's also to, I'm hoping that the way I crafted the goal language was to really raise awareness of, this is about livability for a segment of a population that is maybe not super visible to many of us, but exists and is potentially growing. And the teddy bear is a huge employer, particularly during,
and their seasons change so that their routes need to change.
Yes, yeah. And I understand an employer of a lot of new Americans who, probably, don't have a car, or, they're certainly challenged as they're getting on their feet in this country.
Okay, so then moving on to number 4, before I accept this one, I just want to make sure that, because locating public transit stops reachable by paths and sidewalks to extend the range of potential users, I thought was a pretty good point. I wasn't sure if that went somewhere else.
It might be, that's in recommended actions, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so some of this was, I was trying to distinguish between objectives and, because a lot of this was just sort of, I don't know, narrative, basically, that I had to turn into goals, objectives, recommended actions.
Yeah, okay, so then it's great when you clean up the formatting stuff. It cleans up the document nicely. So then we're down to recommended action number 6, unless there's any points in between.
And CCTA, that just needs to get changed to.
Yeah, that's the it's called GMA, something, whatever.
Is it just GMT, Green Mountain Transit?
Yeah.
Okay. And then providing links on the town website's good. Okay. Safe routes to school. All right, so then we get to the parking section, which is livability, sense of place, and a robust local economy. Yeah.
You should be fined, like have to pay a tax if you don't put your kid on the bus or something, then goes to pay for other fucking things. If a bus goes to your house, you have to put your child on the bus or pay an extra fee.
Well, we've had people who, refuse to vote for new school buses because they say, oh, nobody's riding them.
Right.
So.
I have a cure for that.
Yeah, what's that?
No right turns between 3 and 4:30.
And I'm guessing some of these got moved to recommended actions.
Probably.
Yeah, looks like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
If you only allowed buses to turn right, that would cut back on traffic, and people would stop picking their kids up and make them take the bus.
hey, it works for EPS. They saved a ton.
Yeah, I was saying, or you have if your, house is served by a bus, then you just keep track of who rides the bus, and you have to pay like a little small fee every time your kid didn't take the bus. So you're funding other traffic things.
So, let's see. Yeah, I thought for a while about the on-street parking. It wasn't this particular one. Yeah, anyway, I thought that was creative. Oh, that was not intentional. Okay, so this.
Well, it's an easy and very inexpensive way to increase public safety immediately. when you have on-street parking. And like, I think that would be a really inexpensive way to achieve more safety on Falls Road, for example.
I think they pulled east side parking off because people were coming out from between cars, going into the park. That was, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe.
Well, now they've got some, crosswalks and things like that, so I think it's more managed, but, anyway.
Actually, yeah, you're right, there's more direction.
What do you mean by the more distant parking?
Wait a minute, which one is that?
Number 5, provide
Number 5.
incentives for and easy ways to use the more distant parking. where
Oh,
there's-
I must, the is a mistake. I guess I was thinking about like economic development and things like that.
What does that mean, more distant? Like, in other words,
Like if there's
cheaper, further away from the center of town?
Yeah, or if there's like an event or something going on,
Uh-huh.
just something at the museum or,
like running a shuttle from a larger lot.
Yeah. At one point, Paul Boney had this very interesting idea at one point. He was talking about, I guess it was when the brewery was going in. We were just chatting, and he had this idea of a multi-purpose path. This is, imagining if we had like a boutique hotel, and, people go to your vineyard, they could go to the winery, the brewery, they could just live it up. There'd be great restaurants, and then there'd be this sort of shuttle thing that would take them back to the boutique hotel. we were thinking, wouldn't that be great?
Because there is public transit, and there's that cluster of hotels, and there's downtown Burlington, and you could technically hop on the bus. But I like that idea of being able to get to where Fiddlehead, the vineyard, that whole complex, you've got businesses there. And then even the idea, I think I just changed that from more distance to satellite parking.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it.
Like that kind of thing. I think like UVM, the Med Center does that. They've got satellite lots in various places.
It's the kind of thing that if you have a tourism, a big element in your local economy is tourism, which we have. It's the kind of thing that might be something to think about. Events at the farm, events at the museum, rather than having to put the burden of parking on site there. Could the town facilitate some of this?
Could be the Greenacre put it down. Charge on the shuttle.
There you go. Yeah.
Do that too.
Some of this isn't, the town doesn't own parking lots, so it's really an attempt to make sure that you have available the public street parking for people who are more transient. So keep employees from using up street parking spaces, as an example. So if there was a way to work a deal with the field house, let's say, and you could create an incentive for a certain number of employees. I'm not saying that they're parking there because their bosses are usually going to say, don't park where a customer could park, but that's the principle. And if they get a certificate for something, then, because they're not going to use the space for 8 hours. In Shelburne, it's going to be fairly localized, because they're going to, make that one walk to work, but they wouldn't make it unless they knew that they were going to get a pint of Ben & Jerry's every week or something.
We all have our motivations. Okay, so I think, at least from an editing standpoint, there wasn't anything. This is mostly cleanup.
So one of the things that, since the select board meeting on Tuesday night makes it sound like that study is not going to go forward, I would say 7 could be reworded to say the 2000 Shelburne Village parking study and any updates. Don't make reference to 2018 because it's not going to happen.
So is it 2007?
It's the 2000 Shelburne Village parking study and any updates, and strike which is being updated in 2018.
Well, that's a bummer. Okay.
Or as updated or something. Or including any updates.
I was wondering if they talked about traffic on the intersection.
traffic at the intersection, they're going to be talking about transportation again. First, it seemed like it was going to happen at the first meeting in June, and now seems like it's going to be in the second meeting in June. They're going to talk about transportation more.
Did they pull up the last study that was done?
They haven't
Recommended action.
gotten into the
Number 3.
details, but they will, or potentially will.
Talks about that study. I'll have to rephrase.
Right.
It says use the updated village transportation study when completed, but now we're not gonna have an updated one, right? Or no? Is that gonna be updated, a village transportation study?
Yeah, recommended action number 3 on the next page.
That's basically it's the same document. It still should be updated, so I think that the way that's worded is okay.
Use any updated.
Yeah, all right, you're right.
Use any updated village transportation studies when completed. For use and.
Well, are there going to be
I don't know if there are going to be.
versions?
Yeah.
Or what, can it just be the? Well,
Use an updated village transportation study if completed. If and when completed.
As.
No.
When completed is okay.
It just puts it out there, yeah.
Okay.
I did have
It also helps if this comes up in the future, a grant to pursue this language helps the select board understand some of the, the benefits of this, what it could bring, what we're hoping to try and leverage from this.
I was curious, was the recognize the attractive, or that attractive pedestrian settings, should that be its own point?
Yes, I'm not sure that why
Sort of
that
munched
isn't-
together with
Yeah, I think.
impervious surfaces
Yeah,
too.
Okay, yeah, let's see. Yes, and so the reason for putting that with stormwater was specifically to do with the ongoing site plan consideration for the town center, associated with the library.
Right.
I had some concerns, which I shared with various people, that the stormwater resiliency goals were being pursued at the expense of, the incredible importance of this place for pedestrian activity and social gathering, and I wanted to make sure that the balance is struck, because it's and right now this is the only way to do it because we don't have zoning that actually really gets into that.
So should, instead of and, should it be but also? Maybe.
The concept is there. The sentence, it just reads.
It's just weird. Let's
Funky.
see. That attractive.
And also that.
That lead to local business or that something
Wait, what?
support local business
What was it
vitality.
saying? Recognize that attractive pedestrian settings promote social gathering opportunities, lead to both vitality, and also that enhanced stormwater resiliency from rivers depends on parking that is right size. Because we're recognizing
Okay,
two
yes,
things
yes,
here.
right.
We're recognizing attractive
Right.
pedestrian settings, and we're recognizing enhanced stormwater.
Right, and we're
resiliency.
saying that all these three things need to
And
happen
the
at the
period should
same
be
time.
inside the quotes.
And there's no reason
Yes.
it can't.
I knew I liked you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
What grade did you teach again?
Primarily middle school.
That's perfect. That's right. That's my
Annoying,
speed.
just like the worst age. Yeah, there's
This is why it resonates so well.
a grammar Nazi.
I got stuck in 7th grade.
Actually, it's a great age. I love kids that age.
No, I do too, but I mean, it's just like
Yeah.
teaching them grammar just drives them bananas, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm expressing my own,
My comment on
You're not E coming, so you can just do it right. You know?
my comment on removing the
That's right.
yeah the minimum parking requirements.
Colin Queen, have you read that?
No, but
I don't know where
I
that
know
goes.
of
I
it,
just
yeah.
feel like that might require an objective framework of some sort. Because we had the issue with I mean, if you look at the Cafe Shelburne, that's come up in the past where it's, there's 6 spots or so, and that's not enough for a viable restaurant that wants people coming in a lot. And then there were alternatives to say, well, perhaps that could then be shared with the rest of that lot because the hours are different from the other businesses there. But I think and I don't know what the minimum parking requirements are off the top of my head. It just, to say to remove them could impact a business that's already got limited parking near it. So I was just looking for some kind of a qualifier of consider an objective framework or something based on, and that gets ugly really fast. So,
I mean, 2 principles are places that are cores, so like in the village core, and the other would be that have high levels of service from transit. The village core is a place that Larry Williams would say, if you've got a parking problem, that's a good thing. So the core and areas served by transit. The transit is going to be more important for residences and dialing back on parking requirements for things like apartments.
Well, one of the things that we want to encourage is a sort of, particularly in the village, is a kind of park once, walk all over the place, spend a lot of time there. And so that again, that gets to that sort of satellite parking kind of thing. So maybe there could be parking, and I mean, in an ideal scenario, you might have maybe somebody kind of adventuresome, but visiting the bookstore and the country store and getting lunch someplace and picking up a bottle of wine or coffee or something, and then heading up to Gail's place and then going to the museum. I mean, wouldn't that be great if somebody would do all those things?
That can be facilitated by appropriate signage, and that maybe as part of your goals, you might want to
put
include
wayfinding signage in there. Yeah, and with like it's a 5-minute walk to the vineyard or something like that.
Or just show a little, decorative map.
Yeah. So you want to put something in there about signage?
And some of the highlights that you might see along the way to make it attractive to do that.
Dean, number 8 covers that.
Okay, there it is. Wayfinding. Yeah.
And I also read, I think I read that somewhere else as well. There's certainly that content.
But I think you're right.
We're so close.
Distances to community facilities or something in businesses. I think it's a good idea.
All right, so let's. I think we can close this out pretty quick. So the next section is if there aren't any other comments here.
How about implement wayfinding for public parking? Blah, 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 clear markings for dressing room, adequate lighting, and then maybe we could put, as at 9, we could put parking, wayfinding signage that has the distances to different destinations.
The Shelburne Business and Professional Association does a brochure map that highlights the businesses, particularly ones that are tourism related.
Yeah.
And if you were to do wayfinding signs and have the capacity to have a little box on it that could hold those, and maybe encourage the town to help fund that.
Or an app or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Consider adding distances to these signs to showcase walkability.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Perfect.
Took away our quorum, dude. All right. So we won't actually do anything yet, but the next section is rail, which my only comment was on number 4, around an easement along the Vermont Railway corridor north of Bay Road. Would that be for a bike path, or is that just to request a general easement?
There is an easement that the town has along the existing corridor that came about as a result. And it is not north of Bay Road. Okay, now I'm sorry, brain cramp. Given what you said, I was thinking of something else. There was at one time a concept for a rail with trail
like a rail
concept.
trail kind of thing.
And this would supplement that.
No, I love the idea. I just wanted to make sure, because otherwise I think this section's been there for a long time, right?
It has been there, and I a couple of things about this section, given all of the controversy involving the salt sheds, I'm not sure how much support there is for it. The idea of a railwood trail project was popular 15 years ago, and it's basically not had any traction since then. So I'm not sure that that's really something that people in Shelburne, it doesn't really serve Shelburne unless it also goes through in South Burlington. You know, the idea was to go from Charlotte all the way to downtown Burlington. Is that something that the town wants to make a recommended action if it's not going to be pursued?
And I think that it would be worth the, I think that's worth the discussion. There was already the investment in putting that trail in Charlotte, I think it's Charlotte, under Route 7, right?
As part of that improvement, yep.
Part of that whole renovation. And if you, yeah, it really ties in with the whole mobility thing that has been the theme.
Certainly would be a cool trail if it went from Charlotte to Burlington.
Right?
Yeah, it's a neat.
No reason it couldn't go further south.
Yeah, imagine them notifying all of the adjoining property owners before that study if you had to.
Right. And then because we still have the Maya conversation, the last thing is the airport, which that there wasn't anything there. Because it had been mentioned in the past about helicopters, I did note and comment in the land use section that there's a whole section on noise. And my thought there was that effectively that would cover that sort of thing, unless somebody really explicitly wanted to call out helicopters, which I believe that was the intent behind the suggestion. So maybe that's just something to keep in mind. If that's an important thing that needs to go here, then that could be a consideration. Otherwise, my take was that the noise would affect, I mean, if somebody's not able to build a windmill because somebody says that's too noisy, then a helicopter certainly isn't going to be able to land in their backyard.
Well, I mean, number 2 gets at it. I mean, motorized aircraft includes helicopters.
And that as well, yeah.
And so that's the first place that you've got it. There are no existing airport, it doesn't say heliports, so.
There was somebody on Webster Road who had a helicopter at one point.
I've heard someone mention that.
John DeBrill had one.
John had a helicopter?
Not that I'm against helicopters at all. Okay, so that concludes transportation edits. We only went over by an hour. An hour and a half, actually. So,
But
yeah.
you finished it.
So there's that, right.
Yes.
Nice job, guys.
Okay, good job. So,
And it was vetted by the Bay Road folks too, which is.
yeah, I'm glad we got through all
I'm
their
feeling like that's
points.
a big accomplishment.
That was big.
Because they
yeah.
were so mad.
How much longer do you want to?
Well,
Talk about Maya.
yeah, I think we should definitely address that. We're not going to be able to get into land use at this point.
Okay.
Was there some small thing on energy that you wanted to do?
If you have it up, I can show you what I did. And actually, the point that was added, Judy had a good suggestion that we might want to make that the first recommended action. I put it at the bottom so that it didn't disrupt for anybody who might have looked at comments.
This one?
Yeah. So it's basically down on page 6, 7. It's just before the generation section. Yeah, so go up. That section can all get removed, but if you scroll up.
Oh, I thought it was going to be spelled out.
I may have, but now scroll down. It's just before generation. Yeah, right there,
pink?
the red. So those, and take a look. It can be reworded. It's just the select board needs to make the request. There you go. And I did put links in the comment there if we wanted to have links, but I think that VCAM is look-upable, and it's a big thing that lots of towns are starting to get on board with.
What does that mean?
It's a program that a town select board chooses to join, and what it does is it provides the town a dashboard and a mechanism for listing projects related to energy efficiency or the commitment towards meeting the state goals. It's not binding. There's no demerits or anything, but it's more for the public to be able to go and look at various towns and see how different towns are approaching this. And so if we had, let's say that there was an initiative to put energy meters in all the buildings and really monitor and look for equipment that's taking more energy than it needs to, and we have basic projections on what that might save, then you would enter that in the dashboard and people could see that. It doesn't mean you have to do it. It just means, hey, Shelburne's considering that. And at the legislative day, they went through a few examples of how towns are using it, and it's a mechanism for facilitating the discussion and getting people talking about what's going on. So from that angle, it's good for awareness.
I think it looks great.
Okay. So if there's no objection, I think I'm just going to move this up to be the first one, since that's effectively the easiest. Well, I won't say that. It is a thing that could be done relatively easily.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really it. So unless there's any wanting to change that, we could talk about Maya and then.
Yeah, that one's ready to get sent off to the select board.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Or at least to Maya.
Yeah.
You want to talk about Maya?
Yeah, so then, well, all right, so let's close out the comprehensive plan and then updates. For now, I guess we'll just punt on land use for.
I think we can get a lot done next meeting. I haven't even had a chance to look at it. I've been so swamped this week.
Yeah, I fortunately had a light day. I did make it through the whole thing. I made some comments, so I hope that would help. And I'm certainly available to bat around ideas and stuff, similar to what we did with the transportation. And I think from a schedule standpoint, like we're pretty much out of time.
Yeah.
Because next time was back to natural resources, I think, right?
Yeah, I have a copy of the schedule
And we need to
on that computer.
try to keep that tight.
Yeah, but we'll have to, I think
We'll have to talk.
We'll talk about how do we fit the pieces together.
All right.
But I think the fact that transportation's done is a biggie.
Yeah.
Big thing.
Yeah. So Maya.
Okay,
Approved.
so Maya and I met at around 4 this afternoon, and we did that because the agreement has been signed. She is prepared to have me send her some things so that she can develop the template that you will react to. What she and I'm going to actually open up my notes document here. She's looking for material that is relatively stable and of an appropriate length. And after we talked about it for quite a while, she and I have tentatively agreed, and that's why I'm looking for you to give me an indication, that I would send her the intro section of the plan and the vision. You folks way back in May through July of 2017 had worked on the vision, and I went back and checked this. So there's the vision, the intro, and then housing and parks and rec, because together they give her enough material. I had talked with her about the possibility of growth and development, but I wasn't sure if maybe there might be some things about growth and development that would change. But for now, those are the pieces that I will give her. I'm also going to be supplying her with photos that she'll use initially as placeholders. And we're going to get that first set of photos from Lee Crone because he's got an extensive library. He's happy to contribute. But something else that I'm going to do is put out a call for photographs through Front Porch Forum. someone, though, at some point, I would recommend, and she would too, someone on the commission be tasked with looking at photos, including Lee's and any others that are from the community, that we can basically get approximately 5 photos per section that we would then give to Maya so that she would choose from those when she lays them out. So at that, the essence is, and I don't want anybody who's already doing a lot of things to take on another task, so think about this. And I was hoping that Stephen was here, thought maybe he would be interested. But someone on the commission, assuming that you want them to have the job, could be tasked with identifying 5 photos per section. And then Maya would have those to choose from as she's doing these designs. Another aspect is the photos for the cover, but that's going to wait. Figures and illustrations, the thing that I'm going to say is that if there are any figures and illustrations that people want to see, I think it's less of an issue for Parks and Recreation than it is for housing. But if there are any, if there's a single chart or something, Andrew, that you think should be called out, then we need to identify that for her, not that she's going to. So I will tell her that that's the section that's most likely to have those. Apologize, I'm a little bit sugar low here. We talked about the cover photos. One question that will arise is, will it be a single photo? Could it be a collage? That's what Essex ended up doing. She wanted people to understand that for some of these things, it could be too difficult for all of you to reach a consensus, and she's happy to make those initial judgments. So understand that she'll take a stab if it's necessary. So just boiling it all down, does anyone have concerns with me sending the introduction and the vision as it was drafted? And I can post these so that you can see them before I tell her, here they are. I told her by the end of the day. So if I send these out so that people see them, the other thing that I need to do is just clean them up as we've done them, where they have the headers and the footers and the page numbers as remnants. She doesn't need any of that. So I'll clean it. I'll make a cleaner version.
Could we send her transportation? Are we sort of done with that?
Well, transportation is one of the longer sections. I had no way of knowing that transportation, and I guess my own recommendation would be to wait until the public meetings are held, because I think some of these sections could change further, and that is a big section. We haven't heard the Paths Committee's response to some of the things that you've heard tonight. I mean, I know you're a member, but she won't take much more than what I've described. So
Okay.
she doesn't want 6 chapters, even though we could send her 6 chapters.
Okay. It's just to kind of get a
And if we
start
send
going.
transportation,
Yeah.
then we would also have the same question of, well, are there any particular graphics and
right.
maps or things like that? So I
Yeah.
think that housing and parks and rec with
This
the intro.
is, just so I'm clear, this isn't also to have a finished version of those 2
No, it's
sections.
for the
They're just
template.
examples that will create a template. So transportation is probably too hefty.
Okay.
Yeah. She was thinking that something like 10 pages. And with all of that stuff, I think that it would work out. 10 pages with her embellishments. So are people basically okay with that idea?
Yeah.
And so what I would propose is I'll send everyone out an email. I'm not going to be waiting for a majority vote or anything like that, but I will send out an email midday that has the text as I've cleaned it up for her, and look for any kind of critical feedback on it. And then the photos, Lee, like I said, is going to provide those. When I send her a link, I'll share it with others if people are interested.
So just to avoid rework later, if you were to post something to Front Porch Forum soliciting photos, that would be a thing where send them in with your name or something? Because I suppose they'd need to be credited appropriately.
Yeah, well, I guess this is one of the questions. I mean, I'm happy to collect photos, and if people want to send them in, and I'll put them on a drive someplace, and then whoever gets the job, if it's going to be a commissioner that wants to have that job, or if me or someone else, they can go through those and come up with the 5 per chapter.
Yeah, I mean, well, you got vice chair when you weren't here. Do we just want to pick someone who isn't here?
Right.
Sorry, you mentioned Stephen.
Well, that was Dick who nominated all of us in absentia, so.
That's true. That's true.
There we go, karma.
Yeah, I was more just thinking logistically about, you could solicit photos, and then as you get them in, you could put them in a folder, but that doesn't necessarily, I mean, unless the photo has proper metadata on it, you'd also need a log of.
I guess he might be just the person for this is Susanna, because she's the public grant kind of, person for King Street, and this might be just right up her alley. In terms of,
maybe a note just asking if Susanna might be interested.
Yeah,
well, right. But just to see if either one of them would have interest.
Yeah, he does too. But I was just thinking Susanna has that sense of
the critical thing initially, because
message.
We're going to use 1 out of every 50 photos.
Right.
So I will just want to know who's got the rights to the photo, and then I'll follow up.
And I think typically when I've seen these types of things in the past, it would be like any photos that you submit could be used by the town sort of thing. So it wouldn't be that, I mean, you'd basically, by uploading a picture, you'd be turning your rights over to enable the town to use it.
Transferring some rights to the town.
Right, and then any of the photos that don't get used, that could go on to a town website or something to say, hey, we got all these submissions, and here, come check out the stuff that you all uploaded, kind of thing, which could be
and for
fun.
now, what she needs, that need can be met by a slug of photos from Lee.
Right.
But
Perfect.
eventually, yes.
Okay.
So I will send out an email to Stephen and Susanna and ask them about having that role. I will get the cleaned up text that I mentioned, let people see it by midday tomorrow, and then I'll forward it to her.
I think that was my very first meeting where you guys were like, because I joined about a year ago, I think. I just remember one of my first meetings, similar baseball parking issues. It sort of had this deja vu feeling today. But yeah, so that seems like ages ago, the vision intro stuff.
Yeah, it did to me too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow.
I think we probably, having gone through, because it was a mystery to me, and having gone through so many sections, it's probably worth revisiting.
I mean, there may be like a formatting hiccup or something, but this is the text as I got it.
Just that one graph.
Well, this is a copy, so it's got everything. It's clean.
Yeah.
Okay, but.
So is that, I mean, if there's interest in reading over this or something and providing immediate feedback, if there's anything that jumps out based on our revisions over the last year with the rest of the plan, then that could be a thing. But comments would have to get to you immediately because this is going to.
Yeah, and she's. It's not like she can't change things. She just doesn't want to do wholesale rewrites of anything that she's using.
Right. I certainly wouldn't see us doing that given the time that we put in there.
Pages. It's pretty well condensed, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, it says it all in short and
I
sweet.
see some edits I'd make.
Yeah, you should probably hurry up and make them.
Get on it.
Get on it.
Extra 4 in there.
And then is that, I'm just trying to be very mindful of time. Is that then, and to make sure you get some calories, is that good for the Maya part?
Yes.
You did have right after this, you did have the schedule, and next time was planned to discuss future land use and public works and stormwater. The question that I had was future land use would be, ideally per our construct, we would want to have edits prior to Thursday so that the packets could go out, right?
The one thing that helps us is we have an extra week. Because we have 5 Thursdays.
End of month, right. Okay, yeah, so we have, 2 weeks from today, is that a feasible thing to have edits or any discussion that you'd like to have around? Okay.
I'll have some
All right.
space opening up in my schedule.
Because that might be a good one to actually have a printout of that section. Because I'm just thinking, especially being able to look at transportation, because there is overlap in a lot of these things. And then on the public works and stormwater, I didn't see an owner.
Didn't see a what?
An owner, like a
Yeah, there wasn't anybody
commissioner.
who'd ever given that task, and I had said that I would do it working with Chris on the stormwater piece and
Oh,
the public
perfect.
works. So I have material assembled to go towards it. It's really going to be more of a question of like, where does it fit in?
Because land use could take up the whole, like we just did. But if there's,
Yeah, I think it's going to work out to be more suggestions to, retroactively go back and say, okay, to address this topic, we should go into the growth and development section, which is really where that stuff lives.
right.
And put this change here.
okay.
That's where it's, in the structure of the current plan, that's where it lives, the public works stuff.
Got it.
Stormwater, whoops, Gail's not here.
She's sneaky.
Stormwater has a lot of interest on the part of the Natural Resources Committee, so their draft deals with
Had a
stormwater,
lot.
but I think
Yeah.
it also needs to be in public works, in growth and development, public works.
Okay.
So there's no sections we can assign.
Right.
Are there any other sections without owners?
There was
Just thinking
there's
Steve
a
and
resilience.
Asim
citizen
need something to do.
participation section we have, and I'm not sure even how we intend to deal with that. It's, we've had a section called citizen participation because that's one of the statutory requirements. In the format of the new plan, it doesn't seem like that makes any sense at all. I think it's going to be a paragraph that we have to figure out where it best belongs. Is it at the end as a coda, or
Right.
is it going to be part of the intro? But that's one that wasn't assigned. Relationship to adjoining communities, that's another one. And you don't really know that until you've done everything. And it really comes down to the future land use map.
Yeah.
So when we get the future land use picture settled, then we can compare that map to all the adjoining communities.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then I think we also, there's no commissioner questions or comments.
Just that the stormwater committee is not working on really stormwater, is working on the mechanics of funding it.
The ordinance,
That's the
utility.
All right.
the utility.
All right.
Okay.
Well, hopefully, some of the stormwater and public works stuff will be informed by the future land use, because that's going to be, have a bearing on how we're hoping future development occurs. So,
So to be formal, any other formal business or correspondence? No. Then motion to adjourn,
so moved?
a second? Second. All right.
All right.
Moved by Kate, seconded by Dick.
Well, thank you for all the hard work tonight.